Audley Harrison.
Yes.
Mike Middleton. And you describe this as the story you're about to read is a 5-star ocean-going fur-lined farce, ludicrous, comical, and absolutely true. So he just, the guy had come off the back of winning the Olympic gold, first time a Brit had won it since 68. Everything looked as if it was moving in the right direction for him until this.
And well, they managed to pick a guy who, when they picked him, he was banned. And the reason why we know that Mike Middleton was banned is that there was a printed sheet of his record, and it had on it at the bottom, they hadn't even Tipp-Ex'd it out, the fact that he was banned. And also, Mike Middleton stands in front of us and tells us that his daytime job is as a undercover agent at Disneyland in Florida. So we say, well, what do you mean undercover, Mike? What do you mean? He said, well, I dress up as Mickey Mouse and Pluto. Get in! Audley Harrison's fighting he's fighting Mickey Mouse. You can't invent this stuff. You're a newspaper man. Once again, this is God. And then, of course, and this was the only chapter in the book that got seriously legal. That little thing you read, that was well-chosen words by me, the publisher, and me, the editor, and the lawyers. Lots of lawyers hurried around this one. There was all sorts of crazy things in it. It's all true. He was kidnapped, but he wasn't kidnapped. Some men did come to his room and offer him a deal, which did happen. And then some people came to his room and offered him an alternative deal. Kelly Maloney, stroke Frank Maloney, suffered some amnesia. She can't remember driving in the back of a Rolls Royce with Mike Middleton and delivering him to a rival promoter. When the rival promoter came in to work the next day, he couldn't believe it. Who's sitting in his boardroom but Mike Middleton, who officially had been kidnapped the night before? And then, lo and behold, a group of press arrived for a press conference that was never formally announced. As I say, you can't invent this stuff. It's all true. Every single aspect of that story is true. Mike Middleton did dress up as Mickey Mouse. He was kidnapped. He did fight for a rival promoter, and he did clear in the end something like 47,000 quid or $47,000 instead of the 5,000 that his original contract said. So it's a great story. And the man that devised the kidnap and put it into place, and he's in the book, he's mentioned, he still was getting Christmas cards from Mike Middleton up until the year that Mike died, which was last year. That's all of it's true. If I scripted that, if you were commissioning editor for a limited edition series somewhere out in America, and I was trying to pitch this to you, Tim, as a Netflix story, you would have said, hey, Steve, one second. Have you got any more stories? I don't like that one. I don't believe it. You wouldn't believe it. You can't invent this stuff. It's true.
Johnny Boss.
Johnny
Boss was the guy with his big white coat.
Johnny Boss was a matchmaker who some people under about the age of 35 believed didn't exist. Trust me, he did exist. And some people believed that the publicity shot in the, with like the gold rimmed Elton John style glasses and his white fur coat is fake. No, it was real fur. And that's really Johnny Boss. And he genuinely did say things like the criteria for a Frank Bruno opponent is a pulse, but not much of one. One of the opponents he supplied lost both his toupee and his teeth in the ring. Now, I wasn't at that fight, but I remember it. I remember watching it. Had I been at that fight, I would have written about it, because that's another thing about this book. The 80 stories of fights and interviews and funerals and prison visits. Yeah. They're all things I attended and I wrote about. So there's a paper chain. So if you're thinking I've invented this story about Mike Middleton and Audley Harrison, you can follow the stuff that we wrote at the time, which was daily for about 5 days. And then obviously in the last 10 years or so, we're moving into pod territory, or it's stuff I've done on television and or radio. All of it is traceable. So when I talk about some of the Muhammad Ali story, there it is on the front page of the sports section of the Daily Telegraph. And I think that to me was, and I may be jumping ahead, I'm sorry if I have to, that to me was really important, is that I wanted everything inside the book to be stuff that if people were bothered, they could go and trace and find out, wow, that actually happened. He wrote about that 27 years ago, 22 years ago. And in fact, it was a marvel rereading, because I'm a nerd, actually. So it was a marvel rereading my actual newspaper cuttings. So I've kept just about everything I've ever written. And it's semi in order. So actually pulling it out and reading it again, I'd forgotten so many details. I'd forgotten all sorts of incredibly tiny, small details, because when you were writing for the Telegraph in the late 80s and early 90s, and then the Independent from the late 90s through, you had to put the details in there. There was no other way to get them. So you put the weight, you put the short colour, you put anything that you saw and it happened in the build-up. There were far more details in boxing previews and boxing reports then. And it might be the same for all sports, because there's so much available now that you can check and watch, that perhaps people leave out details that previously were included. Well, I belong to the previously were included gang. So I still like to put in detail, because sometimes we don't put in that. I mean, I'm talking about basic details like their weight, when they weighed in. Just small things like that. Who was in the corner, maybe age. I mean, sometimes we don't include age and weight in fight reports now. I mean, this is bread and butter. This is straightforward old school journalism. And by the way, Tim, I don't live in the past. I'm from the past, but I don't live in the past. Some of the boxers we have right now could go back in time and clean up. Trust me. You know, not everything back then was glorious and golden, especially the way they were paid peanuts. Let's get that right. I try not to live in the past, but, you know, if you're writing about people that are dead, unfortunately, you've got to visit the past.
Sugar Ray Leonard.
Yeah, what a bad night.
And Terry Norris, the light middleweight title at the Garden, Madison Square Garden in New York, 1998.